Hey learners, I'm Vishaka and welcome back. Today we are finally doing the video so many of you asked for. We are going to talk about Docker. It is probably one of the most important technologies you learn as a developer. Whether you are into cloud, DevOps, backend engineering, AI or Kubernetes, you will run into Docker sooner or later. But most people learn a few commands, run a container and never really understand what's happening underneath. At a simple level, Docker means you package your app with everything it needs. That package runs the same on any machine, your laptop, server or cloud, no difference. This sounds simple, but in real life there are images, containers, Docker files, networks, volumes and multi-container setups involved. So in this video, we'll build that understanding from the ground up. We'll cover why Docker exists and how it's different from virtual machines. Then we'll go into the Docker architecture, client, daemon, images, containers and the registry, where the daemon actually runs on your machine and why you need Docker Desktop. Then we'll dive into how Docker files, images and containers relate, including image layers and caching. Then we'll also look into the container lifecycle, storage with volumes and bind mounts and networking. By the end of this video, you will be ready to build a real Docker project, which will also be a part of our next video. So stay tuned. Now let's dive in. First, why Docker exists. Before Docker, developer faced a very familiar set of problems. A developer writes code. It runs perfectly locally and then it breaks in testing or production. Why? Different operating system versions, different dependencies, different configurations. Now, every environment was slightly different and keeping them in sync was manual and painful. The isolation option at the same time was virtual machines. But virtual machines are heavy. Each one carries a full guest operating system, gigabytes of overhead, minutes to boot, and complex configuration. Deployments were painfully slow. Docker changed this by changing what we ship. Instead of shipping just the code and hoping the environment matches, we ship the code and its environment together in one sealed unit called a container. Now, containers are lightweight. They use fewer resources than virtual machines. They are portable, which means you can build once and run it anywhere. Then it's also consistent, the same environment everywhere. They are fast, which means they can start in seconds. Also, they fixed a security problem, that is isolation. Each container runs separately from others. So the mental model is a container is your application plus the environment packaged into one portable unit. Now, why exactly are containers so much lighter than VMs? Let's compare the stacks. A virtual machine setup looks like this. Infrastructure at the bottom, then there is the host OS on top of it, then a hypervisor, then a full guest OS for every single virtual machine. And then finally, your application. 3 apps in 3 VMs means 3 complete operating systems running side by side. This is why VMs are heavy and slow. Docker removes the middle layers. We have the infrastructure at the bottom, then the host OS, then comes the Docker engine and then the containers. There is no hypervisor, no guest OS per application. And these containers shares the host operating system's kernels. And this single design decision is why they are lightweight and fast. But this also means the isolation is at the process level, not at the hardware level. For most application workloads, that is completely fine. But for workloads that have a hard security boundaries, VMs still have their place. So the trade-offs is VM has stronger isolation, it's heavy and slow, whereas container has shared kernel, it's lightweight and it's fast. Now let's look at how Docker actually works internally. Docker follows a client-server architecture and it has a few key components. First, the Docker client. It's the CLI. This is the command line tool you interact with. Every Docker command you type goes through it, but the client doesn't do the actual work. The client sends the commands to the Docker daemon, also called as the Docker engine. This daemon is the core of Docker. It builds images, runs containers, and manages networks and volumes. Then our next component is Docker images. It's the read-only template used to create containers. Then we have the Docker containers itself. It's the running instance of those images. It's lightweight, portable, and isolated. Next, we have the Docker Hub. It's a cloud-based registry service. Think of it as GitHub for container images. We can push our own private images to this registry and we pull official images as well from Docker Hub, such as Nginx, MySQL or Redis. So the complete flow looks like this. You give a command through the Docker CLI. The CLI talks to the Docker daemon. The daemon pulls the image from Docker Hub if it's not present locally. Then this daemon itself creates and runs the container. This is the entire machine. 4 components, 1 flow. Now here's a question worth pausing on. Where does it actually run on your machine? The Docker daemon runs natively as a background service. Containers share the Linux kernel directly and everything just works. But here's the catch. Many of us develop on Mac OS or Windows, not just Linux servers. And naturally, Mac OS and Windows don't have the Linux kernels. Does that mean we cannot run containers on these machines? This is exactly why Docker Desktop Client exists. Docker Desktop is an application. It sets up a lightweight Linux kernel machine on your Mac or Windows laptop, and it runs the Docker daemon inside that virtual machine. So as an example, when you type a Docker command on your Mac OS, it talks to the daemon running inside that Linux virtual machine, and your containers actually run in that Linux environment. So you never notice the virtual machine. Docker Desktop Client makes it feel native. It also bundles a CLI, a dashboard to inspect containers and images, and also Docker Compose, which lets you run multiple containers. We'll go through it in detail in the next few minutes. But the gist here is Docker Desktop bundles everything all in one install. Now let's dive into the main components of Docker: the Docker file, images, and the actual container. First, a Docker file. It's basically a text file with instructions to build an image. Now, what is an image? Think of it as a blueprint, everything your application wants along with the application. Then the container is basically an instance of this particular image. So the flow here is you write a Docker file. Docker build creates the image, and Docker run command starts a container from it. The key point to note here is the image is static. It cannot be changed once it's built. But the container, on the other hand, is dynamic. It runs, changes states, can be stopped, and also can be removed. Also, this one image can create multiple containers, all behaving identically. Now let's make it concrete with a Docker file for a Java application. The first field you see here is the from field. Here we have given a JDK image. It's the base image we start from. This particular field sets the working directory inside the container. Then we provide the copy command. Now this is important. It copies the application file from the host machine into the container. Then we set an environment variable. The expose field documents that the container listens on port 8080. Next, the command field. It's the default command that runs when the container starts. Now there are few more instructions worth knowing. One of them is the add field. It is similar to copy command, but it also supports URLs and auto extracts tar files. And the most important one that I don't want you to miss is the entry point field. It is one of the core executable, basically a command that the container will always run when it starts. This brings us to a classic interview question. What is the difference between CMD and entry point? CMD provides the default command and arguments, and it can be easily overridden when running the container. But entry point here logs the container into running a specific program. It cannot be overridden easily. So the rule here is CMD is for flexible defaults, and entry point is used when container must always run a specific program. Next, we'll dive into some advanced layers, that's image layers and caching. Now here's something clever happening inside those images. Docker images are built using a layered architecture. Each instruction in the Docker file creates a new layer stacked on the one before it. The from field creates the base layer. The work directory adds another layer. The run command adds another layer. Then there's command, copy, that all adds newer layers. Now, why does this matter? The answer to that is caching. When you rebuild an image, Docker checks each layer. If a layer hasn't changed, Docker reuses the cached version. Only the changed layer and every layer above it gets rebuilt. This is where layer order matters in practice, which means you put things that rarely change, like dependency installation, early in the Docker file, and you put things that change constantly, like your application code, later. If you do that, whenever there's any code changes, it rebuilds in seconds because the dependency layer stays cached. Get it backwards and every build reinstalls everything from scratch. Now there are two more properties worth remembering. Layers are read-only, and only the thin writable layer on top changes while the container runs, and anything written to that writable layer disappears when the container is removed. Hold that thought, we'll fix it in the storage section. Next we have the container lifecycle. First, Docker create. The container is created here. It exists but it hasn't started. Next, Docker start. Now it's running. Next, we have Docker paused. The container is still alive, but the processes are frozen. Docker unpause resumes the processes back again. Docker stop, as the name suggests, the containers are not running anymore, but it still exists on the disk. And finally, Docker RM, which means the container is deleted and cannot be recovered. So the life cycle for Docker container here goes from created to running to paused or stopped to finally removed. An important detail here is a stopped container still exists. You can start it back again, but a removed container is gone permanently along with everything inside it. Now this brings us directly to the data problem. Our next section here is storage, volumes and bind mounts. Containers are ephemeral. When a container is removed, the data is lost. For example, if you run a database in a container with no persistence, if you remove that container, the data is gone permanently with it. So to persist data, Docker gives you two options: volumes and bind mounts. Volumes are managed by Docker itself. They are stored inside the Docker host under var lib docker volumes folder. They are platform independent, easy to backup and recommended for production. So for instance, if your MySQL container writes to a volume, if you kill the container and start a new one and attach the same volume, the data is still there. The next option is bind mount. It mounts a directory from the host machine directly into the container. They are platform dependent and less portable, but they are great for development because when you edit the code on the host, the change reflects inside the container immediately. No rebuild is needed. So the rule is simple: volumes for production, bind mounts for development. Our next section is Docker networking. Now our containers can store data, but they also need to talk to each other and to the outside world. Docker gives you 4 network types. First, the bridge. This is the default one. Containers on the same bridge network can communicate with each other and also can access the outside network. As an example, your app container can talk to your database container on the same host. That's a bridge. The next network type is host network. Here, the container shares the host network directly. No isolation at the network layer. It's faster, but use it deliberately. A third option is none. Here, the container has no network access at all. It is useful when you want complete isolation. Our fourth network type is overlay network. It connects containers across multiple Docker hosts. It's also called the swarm mode territory, and conceptually it is also the stepping stone to what Kubernetes does at scale. The mental model here is bridge mode for containers talking on one host, host network mode for raw speed without isolation, none for no access at all, and use the overlay network mode for multi-host communication. So far, everything we have done is one container at a time, but real applications aren't one container. A typical application has an application itself, a database, and a cache. Here, starting each container by hand with networks and volumes gets very complicated. This is where Docker Compose comes in. It is a tool for defining and running multi-container Docker applications. With a single YAML file, we configure all the services, networks and the volumes required for your app. In a Docker Compose YAML file, each service gets its own configuration. Here in this example, the app service defines its image and maps port 8080. The depends on variable tells Compose to start MySQL before the application. The MySQL service sets its environment variable and mounts a named volume so the data persists, and the Redis service just points to its image. Here Docker Compose automatically creates a default network, so the services can reach other by name. Your application connects to MySQL as a host name. No IP addresses, no manual wiring. Then the workflow is a handful of commands. Docker Compose up builds and start all services. You can add the -d flag to run in the background. Docker Compose logs, as the name suggests, can help you view logs for all the services. Docker Compose PS lists running services. And when you run Docker Compose down, it removes all containers and networks. So in summary, you can run 3 containers using one file and one command. That is the payoff of everything we covered today. One of the most used command in Docker is the docker ps command. It's basically used to list all the Docker containers running on your system. So by default, whenever I run any application, the first thing I run is docker ps. Now let's run the whole flow back. Docker is a tool that packages your application with its environment, so it can run the same way everywhere. Containers share the host kernel, that's why they are lightweight and fast, whereas VMs are comparatively heavy. the Docker CLI talks to the daemon, and on Mac and Windows, Docker Desktop is used to run that daemon inside a hidden Linux VM. And on the component side, a Docker file builds an image. An image runs as a container. A container is an instance of an image. Images are layered, and smart layer ordering keeps your builds fast. In the lifecycle, container moves through created, running, stopped, and removed. Also, their data dies with them. Hence, volumes are used to persist that data in production. The other option is to use bind mount for development purposes. On the networking side, we have the bridge mode that connects containers on one host. And overlay mode helps you with multi-host communications. And Docker Compose brings the multi-container application up with one file and one command. That's it for today. In the next video, we take all of this and build a real Docker project with it. Do subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you in the next video.